Hi, Sammar. Welcome to the Speak as a Leader podcast. I am delighted that you joined us and I am excited for our conversation. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be with you.
So you have had a fascinating journey. You have worked at some of the companies that people dream about working at. You've worked at Deloitte, KPMG, IBM, Philips, and now SAP. So I would love for you to tell us about your journey so far. But I have one additional challenge for you. I would love for you to tell us one thing that you learned at each of these companies and one thing that you would change if you could.
It's an interesting question. So yes, you're quite right. I've had an interesting career journey. I think it started originally, for me following a career in technology, and that's how I ended up in these companies and studying computer science and then management and following that through and taking opportunities as they came up. And, along that journey, following technology into industry, first of all, with Philips, for example, and that was exciting in the sense that, what I was interested in was making technology work in terms of solving problems for business. So some people are attracted to the bits and the bytes and cutting code and all of that. And obviously I had many colleagues in IT departments I worked in who were exactly that, right? They really loved coding and solving those sorts of problems. But I was always interested in the join between business and technology and how you translate that into a plan of action. You want to apply this technology to solve a problem. So, a lesson learned at Philips, for example, which, is a great long-standing company. I don't think many people know. It was founded in the late 1800s, and it was originally a light bulb factory that grew and grew. One of the lessons from an organization like that was technology is part of their DNA, of course. There's always been leading in, for example, electronics. But then also having a set of social responsibility. This is something I really respected about Philips as an organization, even today. This company was founded on Calvinist principles. They really took to heart the importance of looking after their employees, their customers, sustainability, and so on. And this was baked into their DNA from the very beginning. There's a movement of industrialists at that time in the kind of late 19th century, early 20th century, such as Cadbury's and other such, founding industrial titans who were concerned about the welfare of the environment, about the people who worked there, and cradle to grave care. So you really felt part of a family. And that was one of my formative experiences. And, I was pleased to discover the famous PSV Eindhoven football club actually stands in Dutch for the Philips Sporting Union. If you go to Eindhoven in the Netherlands, that is the home of Philips, where the company was founded. And almost every brick in that town was built and paid for, including the football club, originally for employees to play football, as a contribution from the Philips family. So that was, a kind of a great foundation experience, not only from a work perspective, but also the wider, social responsibility, understanding the role of companies, technology, and, good custodians of technology and delivering benefit to everybody. So that was a great formative experience. And then as I moved on in my career, taking that sort of learning from that industry and applying technology, that allowed me to take that into consulting. And so from there, I went to Deloitte, then later KPMG. And there I was able to apply those insights of working in a industrial manufacturing company, consumer products company, using technology to work with a wide variety of customers in similar domains. So whether that be retail or consumer products, I worked with a whole host of household names. And so the lesson learned there, picking up was how to apply your experience in different scenarios and be able to relate that to the customer situation. So the benefit of me joining that organization was that I could bring that experience in industry and often represent to say, yes, I've seen that challenge before. I've worked in that situation before. I understand the kind of challenges you have in whatever factor that may be. So that way you help build trust with a customer when you're selling advice effectively. Because in consulting, what else are you selling? Right? 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you're selling ideas, you're selling value, you're selling thoughts, you're selling insight. So to convert insight and advice into cash requires you to have trust. And so it's not just the brand that, yes, you happen to represent this well-known brand, be it KPMG, Deloitte, or whomsoever, which carries a certain cachet. But regardless, when you are in the room with the client or with their teams working on a problem, you have to be credible. So having that credibility, that understanding, that thought process, working with the customer, walking a mile in their shoes, showing empathy is very important. And so I find myself in a variety of situations, a variety of customers all over the world, in fact, dealing with some challenging situations, but always injecting empathy in what you do. So you're providing advice. It's not a sort of doctor-patient relationship, like kind of this sort of behavior. I'm a consultant, I know best. That often doesn't help. It's to really empathize, understand, build trust. And from that perspective, then your advice is much more greatly appreciated. And then as I've progressed, then I've taken those values forward, both from Philips and from my consulting career. I worked in the industry for 5 years here in Dubai in retail. And so I brought that discipline, understand every element of the organization, the front of house, the back of house. And principally, for example, I was working in luxury retail with some very, very nice brand names globally, helping bring them and operate those sorts of brands in Dubai, for example. But that requires a full empathy end to end, from the front of house, from the shop front, all the way across to the warehouse, through to the customer experience, managing the touch points along that journey. And then from my specific role is, how is technology helping those people? Right. So empathy, again, is extremely important. And latterly, as I've come to SAP over the last 4 or 5 years, exactly that, bringing that perspective to SAP. How do you understand technology and innovation in your business? What is your specific situation and challenges in your organization? How can I help? What technology do I have to help you achieve your objectives? It's very different than, for example, going around with a briefcase. Would you like to buy my software? Would you like to buy my solution? Yes, no, maybe, right? That might work, 2 or 3 times out of 10. But in this sort of business to business type relationships, you are firstly trying to build trust, build empathy, and understand the situation of that customer. And yes, I have something that meets your needs, or I have something that a combination of will help meet your needs. And that's often far more well received when you can demonstrate the value of something. So taking this particular piece of technology or software or innovation will help you achieve your goals, whatever those may be. And typically from a business point of view, that's obviously, I'd say, for example, to improve your margin, to improve your profitability, reduce your cost, et cetera, improve employee experience, customer engagement, and so on. A whole galaxy of KPIs and measures. But when you're talking to a business person, that's the empathy you need to have, that yes, I represent a technology company in this particular case, but I understand your business, I understand your industry. I can see where I can help you deliver value. This is all those lessons combined, if I've answered your question, something that I've carried forward throughout my career.
Amazing. I gave you a really tough question to start off with, because you had to, distill. It's more than 15 years of experience that you've had at this point, I believe, into a few minutes. So thank you for that. And I love that it leads us into the core of the podcast, really, because it's called Speak as a Leader. And this is what I am fascinated by, how leaders speak and what impact does it have. And something that you and I have in common is that we've both worked in companies with rich legacies, with rich histories. I was in Procter & Gamble, and that was also founded in the 1800s. And when you become a part of companies like that, you're stepping into a system where what it means to be a leader and what it means to speak as a leader is already very well defined. At P&G, for example, speaking as a leader meant speaking with clarity, speaking with transparency and honesty, and taking feedback from the team, but ultimately being accountable for your words and your project and your team. So something I'm interested in knowing, especially because you've worked not just at one company or been a part of one culture, but you've gone from culture to culture. And, very strong cultures at that. So you now, currently in 2022, what does speaking as a leader mean to you, Sammar?
That's a very interesting question. I think, all of these brands and organizations you mentioned, have their own particular culture and perhaps tweak on a style. But the training I received, from the early days, came initially from my willingness and enthusiasm to speak up. And as I started my initial career, just a junior person sitting in a team meeting, willing to stick my hand up and ask questions, and then gradually getting the responsibility to start to present to the team, often to people who are older than you, and then taking opportunities for training and development, and making that clear as part of your development plan, and signing up to do various projects where you'd have to present a monthly update or do a report or something, and then gradually building trust with people that yes, you can present in front of a customer. So every organization had its own sort of style, but there are certain principles and a consistency across all of that. So, a good speaker is a good speaker, regardless of the organization, whether they're acting as an individual, whether they're coming in as an external facilitator to a small company, a large company. There's a certain style, confidence, delivery, cadence, etc., which is expected, and that doesn't really change. I think that's essentially always been the same, right? So, if it's like watching an old movie, perhaps from the 1950s or 1940s or 1970s, with a great famous actor doing a scene, it still carries the same weight, right? The performance, the cadence, the voice. Watching Marlon Brando do a 1972 performance in The Godfather, it has the same emotional impact today in 2022 as in 1972. Why? Because the human relationship and the conveying of emotion is consistent, right? You maybe have to go back 100 years where perhaps style has changed so much that, it doesn't quite work, or the technology's not there. But then, I can still show my kids Charlie Chaplin and they'll get that, right? So there's a consistency. And so I don't think it's so much related to the brand or the organization, but it's the right style at the right time. What has changed significantly are the types of props that you use. I started initially with overhead transparencies and flip charts, and then gradually people moved more onto PowerPoint, and then projectors and large screens and so on, and now eventually doing things in a hybrid way. That has changed the style a little bit and the expectation in terms of how things are presented. But speaking style specifically, and to answer your question, is speak as a leader. That's always the same, right? So if you're watching a performance of Braveheart, as giving that speech or whatever, the emotional cadence is the same and crosses ages. And so we talk about rhetoric, in the ancient Greek sense, which was taught, to mostly young boys at that time who were trained to become politicians. The act of standing up and talking and to be heard, be it in the Roman Senate or to be a Roman general or whatever, you had to learn that because the style was consistent, right? And the people would respect your style. So being or lacking confidence in front of an audience will erode people's trust or belief in your message. Being unable to convey a clear thought or a message in a short form way will also, for example, the audience will lose track of what you're talking about and so on. So I think all these pillars, if you like, help build up that supporting structure of speaking as a leader. And it doesn't really matter so much the brand or the organization. Those are constants across all of those.
That's really interesting. It really makes me think about how leadership and communication and speaking to an audience has evolved over time. I agree with you. I agree with some of the things that you're saying, for sure, that the core values and the core qualities that make up a good speaker being able to speak up, as you said. I love that. The enthusiasm and spirit and motivation to speak up and be heard, that remains constant. But I do feel like styles have definitely evolved and changed. There was a time when leaders would, get up behind a podium or on a stage, and there would be this clear difference of status between them and the audience. And they were talking to or addressing an audience without necessarily thinking of it as a conversation. And I do think that that has changed now, especially because now you're not just standing on a stage. Sometimes you're speaking into a camera, like both of us right now. Sometimes you're, like you said, in a hybrid environment where you're in a Zoom meeting and you still have to present and lead, but you're not exactly up on a stage. You're not exactly addressing a bunch of people that are looking at you with eagerness and giving you that authority by default. For me, it's that feeling of having authority by default that has remarkably changed over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with that in the sense that, yes, the subtlety in terms of styles and how it's brought into has adjusted, particularly with technology and working in a hybrid environment. But if I think, all those organizations, specifically those brands that I worked with, we never really had an experience where a leader, a CEO, or, a senior manager was sort of in that sort of public speaking sense, was sort of appearing to be dictatorial or whatever. I think all those organizations had the values of, trying to build a collegiate team and appearing equal. But yes, in that specific instance, they also need to convey, their authority and their credibility that, yes, I'm here to help, I'm here to lead, here's the plan of action, guys, let's talk about it, etc. So there's kind of that connection. And so when it comes to speaking as a leader, what I'm referring to, is the actual delivery itself in terms of the content needs to be authoritative. But in terms of the connection with the audience and being open to take questions and engage with people and be approachable as a personality, that's also very, very important. I'm trying to think of all the CEOs that I worked with. Probably might be one, I think, who very much believed in in their own sort of divine authority. Apart from that, no. I think generally they've been, because they've also come to the ranks as well. People aren't necessarily appointed to these positions, straight out of university. And, earlier on in my career, I got to know, had some friends, for example, in the military, and so maybe you can sign up here and join one of the military branches as an officer, which sounded really nice. Like, okay, great. So you can join after university, and you go to the officer college, you come out, and then you're an officer. And, well, isn't that great, right? You're going to go around everywhere. An officer, you're 22 years old, and everyone has to salute you, and that's it. That's the kind of, you have positional authority, right? You have some power. And I spoke to someone about that quite seriously. Does it actually work? And they said, no. The reality is, yes, by regulation, you have positional authority. So most of the enlisted people, which makes up the bulk of any force like that, will salute you by default, because that's the regulation. That does not mean, and it's a long way from saying they respect you, they think you're good, they'll do exactly what you say. There's a huge spectrum of having to do something because someone has a positional authority to someone actually respecting you as a leader. So you can speak as much as you like, but until you have established a rapport and built that sort of connection with those individuals, they will tend to do, by default, the bare minimum that they have to do, to get to the end of the day. I thought that was a very useful insight, because then it's often the same in business, if not exactly the same. Just because someone has that role doesn't necessarily mean that yes, they might have the right to hire and fire and the rest of it, but does not necessarily mean they have the respect. And having the respect of your audience, your team, makes a huge difference to what they will execute for you on whatever you're talking about. And that's really, when the leadership aspect comes in, right? So you can speak as a leader, but equally you need to have the right authority and the right trust, again, with that audience who will follow you then, right? And will deliver what you're trying to encourage them to do.
That's such a great example, because actually at the time of us recording this, I'm going to be publishing the next episode, which is episode 6 of this podcast. And I actually talked to Jamie Martin, who is the director for the Australian leadership. Let me read out his actual title. He's the director for the Center of Australian Army Leadership. And he talked about something very similar. He was thrown into a position of authority and leadership straight out of his training program in his early 20s. And his journey was exactly like you described, that he had the positional authority, but he had to still earn his authority in the minds and hearts of the people that he was leading. So absolutely agree with you on that it's that balance that you have to strike between authority, credibility, and relatability. And on a similar note, this is a classic question that I ask everyone on the Speak as a Leader podcast. I would like to know if you had a switch flip moment. So did you have a moment in your career where you suddenly realized that, oh, I'm no longer just an employee. I'm no longer just a boss or a manager. I've become a leader. Was there a moment, a particular project, a particular time that you remember where you had this switch flip?
Yes, there are a couple of switches like that. I mean, obviously, when you start your career, I started as a graduate trainee in some of these large companies, then moving my way up. And the way you're often treated by some of the more experienced colleagues, okay, yeah, welcome, you're a trainee, and you're kind of sometimes patronized. But as I mentioned, by trying to push myself to be at the front of things and raising my hand and asking questions, and even having to deal with the snarky remarks of some of the older colleagues who just, I remember vividly, someone would just scoff, but it's okay. You just got to just let it go and keep chipping away at it. And through that process, establish the confidence and rapport with other leaders, not necessarily those immediately around you, because there's a networking aspect to this as well, right? In terms of establishing your presence in the minds of others, so that when you are elevated or have an opportunity to take a speaking role or as a leadership role, you have the credibility and, again, the trust of those sorts of people. So specifically to your question about that switch moment, I see the transition I made, for example, from Philips to Deloitte was most vivid one for me, because I was very passionate to go into consulting. That was always one of my key objectives. As I mentioned earlier, I was always interested in the intersection between technology and business. Yes, I enjoy technology, but I'm not necessarily one of those guys who loves cutting code. I did that initially, to get credibility in the industry, but I wanted to be the person helping make decisions, or be making decisions around how technology is used. And the best place to do that was in the consulting industry. So I was very passionate about getting into that. So my time at Philips was about, building that sort of credibility from a technology perspective, but then translating that into an opportunity where I could then speak as a leader, to talk about it and be in front of an audience who, in fact, is paying me or paying my company, to listen to what I have to say. So the switch moment came, when I applied for the job at Deloitte, and I was very pleased. I got the interview, and I thought, right, okay. I took a week off work before the interview, and I spent a lot of time researching the interview methods and techniques. How does, for example, Deloitte interview candidates at this level? What is expected? In fact, it was a kind of a full day selection center type deal. So you came in at 7 a.m, and you had interviews, and then you had to do practical exercises. You had to do all sorts of things, and then a team exercise at the end of the day. So this was the structure. So I found out all the information I could about how each exercise worked and the types of questions they were asked. And I practiced and practiced and practiced. Absolutely locked myself away in a room and just practiced. You've got 40 minutes to do it. Can I do it in 35? And so on, right? Timing myself, taking this extremely seriously. Now, when it comes to leadership aspect, that was tested at the last exercise of the day, which was you were put into a room with all the other candidates around a sort of boardroom table, and you were given a problem statement. Company X has this problem, and there's proposition A and B. Which one is better? You need to come up with a proposal for that. So they'd give that to you, and there'd be 10, 12, 15 candidates around the table, sort of apprentice style. And then the partners of the company who were potentially recruiting you would be sitting on the outside of this table, watching you, taking notes. So I knew this was going to happen. And so I prepared a stratagem for that, which is I also knew that the other candidates are going to be, some of them are going to be very mouthy, some of them are going to be very aggressive, some of them are going to be a little bit quiet. How can I claim leadership and demonstrate to the group of partners sitting around the table on the outside that I am a leader? Because the point of the exercise is not necessarily to have the best argument. It is to help shape a response to the customer and guide the best outcome from the brains in the room. So my stratagem was, as soon as they put the paper down and said, okay, here's the problem statement. You guys have got 25 minutes to discuss this, to come up with a solution. There's pens and whatnot around the room. Use anything you like. Off you go. As soon as they said go, and then the debate started between the strong kind of extroverts in the room, and I think it should be this, and here's the right way to do that. And so I let the argument run for about 1 minute. So I was like, no, this is completely wrong. It has to be this way, and I think it's this. So I did, while everyone's watching, was I stood up in the middle of the room. I stood up. I grabbed one of the board markers, pens on the table. I walked to the front of the room. I said, thank you, John. That's a great idea. Let me write that down. Now, Jill, what's your suggestion on that? Okay, let's put these two together like this. Well, what do you think, Ben? Well, what do you think, Jack? And so on. Went round the table like that. Okay, yeah, great. So I think we can see, trend building here that A seems to have more pros and cons and so on. And the second that I did that, everyone gravitated in the room to look at me. Mm. So my strategy was to speak as a leader by holding the pen. There's something that I'd researched was that the symbol of authority was holding the pen. And without thinking about it, all these other people now suddenly wanted to filter through me. So I became the custodian of the pen, and they had to convince me of the idea to get it written down. So this was a flip situation that happened in that very split second, where I separated from the crowd to act as a leader in the room, right? So that was, went through those 25 minutes, and I summarized the idea, and I said, okay, guys, we've got 1 minute left. So let me just summarize what you've said. So I think we're saying collectively, do we agree that A is better than B? And here's the reasons why, and how do we think the customer will benefit from that? Okay, great. Thank you very much. They said, okay, time finished. There was no reaction from anyone, the partners sitting around the room. They're just scribbling on their notepads. They said, okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming today, everyone, and we'll be in touch. And I left the building. I remember vividly. I had to catch the train back home. I was thinking, I put so much effort into that. I was ready to collapse. I've been preparing for a week like mad, and then went through this. And I was like, I hope I didn't overdo it. I don't know. I don't know. So I took the tube down. I think it was going to Victoria Station or something. And I got out, just about to board the train, and my phone rang. And I remember it was a man's voice. He said, hello, Sammar. I'm like, yes, you said, "Oh, I'm the lead partner. I was in the room with you this afternoon." I was like, "Oh, yes, thank you. How are you?" "Yes, I'd like to offer you the role immediately." I
Amazing.
was like, "Okay, thank you very much." Yeah,
I'll
so
take it.
yes, I'll take it. Absolutely. So that was my entry into Deloitte, and ever since then, I've always used that strategy. It still works even now. Having a sense of the room, reading the room, and then speaking as leader also means showing that authority and seizing the pen, metaphorically or physically, actually works. So there's a flip moment for you.
And what a fantastic flip moment that was. Thank you for sharing that with us, and super memorable too.
Mm.
I definitely feel, a sense of kinship with you as you told that story and as you've told some of the other stories of your life. I feel that perhaps we could both relate to this feeling of there always being this little voice inside us of that is convinced that we are leaders, that we want to lead, but it's about finding the right opportunity and about proving to whoever matters that we're up for the challenge and so much more. I've experienced that a lot of my life where I've never felt doubt that I am a leader. It's just about making sure that no one else feels that doubt. I don't know if you can relate to that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have to feel it in your bones, right? I used to describe that, particularly my ambition to join Deloitte was something that I felt so keenly. It felt like electricity in my throughout my nervous system. I was so excited and motivated to do that. I locked myself up for a good week or two to focus on that, to say, okay, there's no way I'm going to let this opportunity slip, because I want to achieve that. And so, that sort of imposter syndrome at that point in time, is not necessarily there. It's like, no, I believe in this. I prepared for this, just like, an athlete has prepared for that particular game. Now, I like to watch, big sporting events with my kids, or watch YouTube reruns of great Olympic moments with my kids. And I'll say, look, actually, what you're seeing here, you see that particular race, that particular event, you see the individual standing there, right? That person has spent their whole life working towards that very second. Do you appreciate that? You have to understand that, right? Whether it's a big Wimbledon final or whatever, that first service coming in the final from that player, the second that happens is the full affirmation of a life that has gone into that very moment. So when that individual was a child, somebody helped them, their parents encouraged them, went to a million practices and, did all of that through school and high school and injury and ups and downs. And every single day they worked and worked and worked to achieve, just to be there in that room, on that track, on that tennis court, that precise second, right? What happens after is then entirely up to them, but entire lifetimes of work has gone into it, right? So in the same way, you're going to cross that threshold, you're going to bring that energy, and then what comes are always a unique set of situations. Some of you might have anticipated, some you don't. Some are good experiences, some are bad experiences. Had all of those, right? But now you have achieved that, and then sometimes you have a good day and a bad day, but at least you've crossed that threshold that yes, you're playing in that particular league, you're playing in that particular situation or that particular opportunity you wanted to be a part of. So that's great. But the conduct and delivery and execution of that can vary, and some things are always out of your control. So the latter is then maturity, right? So just pure belief in yourself, it will get you so far, right? So that's the training part of that. Yes, I'm going to work, I'm going to study, I'm going to do whatever. I'll get into the room. What happens then and how well you do at it, is a function of many things. The people in the room, your teamwork ethic, the good, bad, ugly of that situation, the things that are not in your control. And, I have failed at things don't always work out. Have clients who weren't always 100% happy with whatever. And it's the same every day, right? This happens. But with maturity, you learn to manage those peaks and troughs, but try and keep your trajectory, the average, still trending upwards. And that's a consistent balance we all have to manage.
I love the idea of there being these specific moments which make you realize that everything that you've worked for so far in life has led you up to this moment. And being cognizant of that, telling yourself that story for me is also really important. So getting that external validation and credibility, great, but also getting that internal validation and using all these opportunities to keep building that narrative for your own self. And that for me is like my relationship with public speaking, for example, where you take these specific moments and you really make sure that you tell yourself afterwards that whatever you did, however you did on that stage in front of all those people, it was because of your hard work. It was because of your effort. And of course, like you said, luck and other factors always come in. But taking the opportunity to really keep building that narrative for yourself, for me, has been crucial.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, right? And it does take a village, right? And any success, I couldn't say it was entirely of my own making, because I had the support of my family in particular, and my father and my parents, worked extremely hard to make sure I had the right opportunity and put me in the right schools and so on. And when I failed, made sure that I was able to learn from that and get the right help at the right time. When I was younger. But that also then instills confidence, right? Not everyone has those opportunities. Not everyone, has the right set of circumstances. So, wherever then, following on from that thought is I try and offer assistance and help to anyone who asks for it. I've helped many people throughout my career, whether it's coaching or doing CVs for them or giving them interview advice and so on. And so I've done a lot of that in terms to return the karma, if you like, right? So, yes, it's taken good luck, it's taken fortune, not only my good luck, but for example, for many others to be there at the right time, to have the circumstances where they can perhaps offer help or assistance, which has made a huge difference, right? The advice, the sagely advice of, a family friend or, the support or help of a particular mentor at the right time makes a huge difference. And that can really shape your chances of success or learning from failure.
That's very gracious of you. And you're right. You're completely right. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And the more we recognize that, the more we want to pay it forward. And that is the beautiful thing, especially as you climb up the ranks, especially as you become more of a leader, you understand how much your voice means to other people. And you start using that voice to spread positivity, to help people out as much as possible. And that is amazing. I really want to talk about the personal branding aspect here, because Sammar, you're one of those rare people. You're a rare breed because you are completely immersed in the corporate world, but you've taken the time and the effort to also build your personal brand outside of your company. You've, spoken at LinkedIn events, you have a podcast, you've been interviewed. You've really taken steps to create that image, to create that brand. So the first question I want to ask you about that is, do you remember the first time that you were on a public stage, whether it was, an offline stage or an online one? Do you remember the first time that it was a big stage or the stakes were high and you were doing this thing that was outside of your comfort zone?
That's a good question. I think I'm trying to remember now. And I say as a child, I was in the Boy Scouts, so it was another sort of community things. My parents were very keen to encourage me into that. So I had sort of opportunities from that perspective to be present, to have an opportunity to speak up or to give a sort of presentation or talk or deliver something or do a poetry reading or something like that. I can think of, for example, at primary school, going to sing Christmas carols to pensioners and entertain them. And these sorts of formative experiences at least got you used to a situation of standing up, speaking or even singing in my case, and being seen and getting a reaction from the audience, right? So he was a choir boy for some time. So I'd done those sorts of formative experiences. So that certainly helped. I'm trying to think, perhaps in a professional setting, when was the first time I was doing that? Again, probably I can think actually when I finished my master's and I joined SAP actually for the first time in the UK as an intern originally. I spent almost 2 years there, first year as an intern and then working before I went to Philips. SAP were kind enough to sponsor my dissertation on the topic of customer relationship management. And I spent time in Germany researching that topic. Now, the interesting thing was the topic that I researched was looking at a particular project that was done at the time. And I was looking at how successful was that project and what were some of the issues or challenges with that, right? So that was effectively the thesis. Why does this work or doesn't work? And I uncovered evidence that this particular project was not working so well. And so I had to, I gathered those results through interviews and doing research and gathering stats and all of that, very, very thorough. I analyzed all of that, and then I had to present it back to the stakeholders of that project, who also happened to be my boss's boss at the time. And my findings weren't especially positive. So I'd spent, a month, 2 months preparing this presentation, and I had to walk in, I guess, for the first time in a corporate setting to answer your question in a boardroom, and they were sitting around waiting to hear my report, and they're thinking, great, we sent this guy off to Germany, we paid for it, he's going to give us a glowing report, and what I had to show was not necessarily what they're expecting. And it wasn't necessarily a glowing report. Yes, everything is fine and brilliant. And, and I remember I got a visceral reaction from my boss's boss. So, really, no way. This is, how can you say that? And, okay. I think in the end, he took it in the spirit it was meant, but I think it was kind of my naivete in handling these sorts of situations and perhaps not being politically aware. Okay, he has a lot of vested in this, personally, and his reputation in the company, and he's done all of this, and now I'm telling him that his baby's ugly. He's not going to like it. Right, so a couple of things. That was the first opportunity, I think, where I presented in front of, a senior leadership organization. I had to present that. So I think presentation-wise, I was prepared for that. I had to speak up, and all the previous things I'd done led up to that moment. But the immediate feedback was not positive, and it wasn't about my presentation skills or my speaking skills. It was the content of what I had to say. So that's good, right? No one is saying he can't speak or he's not credible. It was what I had to say had a reaction or potential implications that I had not quite considered in that content. So, know your audience. So as I said earlier, you're going to get these kinds of, peaks and troughs and drop-offs. I happened to do almost the first time delivering something like this. Okay, I've got to give the right sort of wrapper around this, right? Just, perhaps soften certain messaging if not detracting from the truth, but don't just go in there straight away and say, yeah, this project you're working on for 3 years is not going as well as you thought, and here's 10 reasons why. Rather, it's going well here, here, and here, and here are 10 things people say is absolutely great, but some things are not going well. Now, you're still conveying the same information, but just think about in which sequence and which order you're gonna say this.
Yeah, learning what your audience is ready for and what they're absolutely not ready to hear, and then being able to deliver those negative messages at times. It definitely is an art and a skill. And also pre-aligning. That was definitely something that I learned in the corporate world, that if you pre-align with certain stakeholders, it makes the meeting go smoother. And thinking of, speaking, actually, no, first I wanted to also check in with you. We're on time. Are you good for time? Can we do about 10 more minutes?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, thanks. So I want to talk about the brand that you've built, especially the brand that you built outside of the company. Because when I first started working on my personal brand, I really didn't know what I wanted to stand for. And I guess I started working on this, even before I did stuff online, because I was, like you, seeking opportunities to speak in public and at events, do trainings and presentations and workshops. And now, probably hundreds of events and interviews and videos later, now I have a better idea of my voice, what I want to stand for, what I want people to remember after I leave the room, what I want people to remember after they stop watching a video where I'm talking. So what does the Sammar personal brand stand for? If you had to tell me, let's say, first in 3 words, if you had to talk about your brand in 3 words, what would those be?
That's a good question. I can't say I really kind of tried to distill it into three key words. But certainly professional, having integrity, and being accessible. So if I explain that a little bit, I mean, the professionalism comes from obviously having credibility, right? And having done, as you said at the start, these sorts of roles, these sorts of organizations in several countries. From that comes credibility. So that's quite important. That yes, you are credible as a speaker, you're credible as an authority on your subject. And then the second and third part is about being accessible, that you can communicate, but also open to ideas and receive criticism, and also opening up to say, yeah, not everything goes well, not everything goes right, not everything is always a success the first time around. It is okay to fail. And so what I'm not trying to present as a brand is saying I'm a paragon of virtue, but yes, I've done these things, so that's my credibility. But within those things, some things go right and some things go wrong. And I'm happy to discuss those and learn from those collectively with you. Right, so hopefully I can convey that brand value. And the other wrapper around it that I've tried to create, for example, with my Strategy Remix brand that I've created, there's a kind of distinct offering, something that's a little bit unique, with a unique spin on that, representing the appropriateness of my generation, my experience. I'm not competing with TikTokers. I'm sort of representing a certain brand of professional with a long memory. I've been around working for, you kind of say 15 years. It's been almost 25 actually. So a quarter of century of experience, right? Which can be distilled, hopefully for the wider benefit. There's something learned along that journey. Good things happen, bad things happen, but hopefully I can share that. And so with the Strategy Remix type of brand that I've been creating, yes, there's strategy, yes, there's corporate stuff. There's also a sense of fun, and you're remixing that and looking at what happened in the past and what's happening in the future, and how can you remix that in a sort of positive way.
I love that idea of wrapping things to make them more accessible, to make them more relatable, to make them more attractive. And the idea of creating these wrappers or dressing things up has come up a few times in our conversation. And for me, it also resonates with the idea of creating a very specific persona when you talk on a stage or when you give an interview. And for me, I'm all for this, building and refining this personal brand, like what you really stand for, being very sure of it, and then understanding how to portray it. And when I talk to some of my clients about it, one of the first things they come up with is, oh, but I don't want to be fake, Nausheen. I don't want to be inauthentic. And the ironic part is that sometimes you want to be yourself when you're speaking in public. You want to be yourself when you're speaking on camera. And yet, the more you want to be yourself, the more you feel like an imposter. I've definitely experienced that in the past. So have you ever struggled with the imposter syndrome when you're speaking to a larger audience?
Generally not, in the sense that I try to ensure that I know what I'm talking about. At least if you know your topic and your subject, you're not going to feel like an imposter. So generally, I don't necessarily have that sort of feeling. I think in terms of your positioning and the way that you talk and the type of cues you're giving, from how you speak, your cadence, your accent. Again, I'm not trying to create anything necessarily false. So I think the lesson learned from that is just be yourself. So if you're being yourself and authentic, right, that's perfectly fine in terms of your content. If in terms of delivery to be appropriate, you have to adjust that style for that particular situation, that's perfectly fine. That doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change the content of what you're saying. It may change the style or the delivery or the props that you use. And sometimes I think people making that transition, like how you're speaking to a small group or a large group or online, a hybrid situation, or to a younger group or an older group, or in a formal setting. If you're, as I have on occasion, I had to address a government minister or somebody like that. There's certain formality expected. Obviously, you need to adjust to that situation, right? But you're going to be as, hopefully come across as credible and yourself. So I don't think I've ever felt that per se, that I've been out of my depth or trying to create something that I'm not.
That's a great response. Content versus delivery. I really like that. Being authentic in your content, but then knowing how to adapt your delivery, how to amplify a certain part of yourself, how to play down a certain part of yourself depending on the situation. And it's really linked with that concept of maturity that you were talking about earlier, I think. The more you expose yourself to different environments, different people, different setups, different cultures, the more nuanced you get in the way that you approach all kinds of communication. So nothing can really replace that experience, but you can learn to do it faster. I think if you truly gain an understanding of who you want to stand for, what you want to stand for, who you are, and how you want to really portray it. So that's a really excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up. And sorry about getting the 25 years wrong. You look really young for your age. I think that's what it is.
Oh, thank you. I think the years have been kind, but think about it. I started my first job in 1997.
Oh, wow. I was in high school then.
Yeah. So I gave a clue to say, look, when I started, people were still using OHPs, overhead transparencies. There's those wheelie things with plastic, and we used to.
Yeah,
I was one of the Gen Zs at that time, relatively speaking, say, oh no, I can do it on PowerPoint, and then we have to go to a special printer, and we get the OHPs printed out in black and white, and you take them like this and stick them down on a projector, right? So if anyone's listening who's from that generation, you'll remember that. I used to go into a customer with a stack of these sorts of things. And in fact, I think I was one of the first people at my university, even though I was doing computer science, to have a laptop, which was kind of gifted by my dad at the time, which was a huge deal in the late 90s. And actually, I gave a presentation with that, and even the staff, wow, where'd you get that from?
Very cool.
So yeah, yes. I've been around, but the benefit of that is for the purposes of sharing experience, right? And back to your previous point, it's that you can bring some credibility, and it's not there were ways of doing things in the past that aren't necessarily relevant or appropriate now, but the experience, particularly to your concept of speaking as a leader, I think, as I said at the start, there's a certain consistency around that, right? And the experience that comes with that, as I said, in difficult situations, in positive situations, in speaking in a hybrid environment, speaking in a ballroom. I'll share one more story with you just as we wrap up. So around a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think just before the pandemic, actually, I was invited to give a keynote at a big industry event in another country. I flew in for that event, and the event was in a big hotel ballroom. There must have been several hundred people there. I was a keynote speaker, and so it was a big introduction, lights and music and all of that. And I called out my name, and I came on stage, to give my big keynote. And behind me was a big screen, a huge screen, So where my slides and everything were set up to play. And as I was walking on stage, they gave me a clicker and the microphone, all of that, and said, okay, no, you're good, off you go. As soon as I got on stage and as soon as the intro ended, right, I had to press the clicker and my slide would appear and I could start delivering the content. So I got on the stage and pressed the clicker and nothing happened. Mm-hmm. Nothing. The screen was black, nothing moved. I've got all these people. I've got the lights bearing down on me on the stage. I can just see the bright lights, the halo effect that kind of gives you, and these people dotted around the room looking straight at me. And it's just crickets, just tumbleweed, like standing there, pressing the button, and nothing is happening. Nothing is moving. So I'm like, okay. So I said, so I just made a joke. I said, hey guys, thank you for kind attention, but that's life in the technology business. Sometimes it doesn't work. I'm there representing this big global brand and it didn't work. So I got a good laugh out of that. And I said, so no, okay. So just while the guys are resetting the system, let me talk to you about A, B, and C. And in fact, I delivered most of that presentation without those props that I had prepared. Right, so it completely fell away. So now suddenly everything was on me. I didn't have the backing of any material to point to. I just had to replay it off the top of my head, all the points I wanted to make. But fortunately, I had obviously prepared. I knew the topic well, so able to speak with authority. And in fact, I think it actually worked in my favor in that particular situation, because now the attention was on me. People aren't necessarily looking at the fancy graphics and the slides and the animations. They're looking at me. And so therefore I was able to then leverage that, which I wasn't prepared for, but now literally take the spotlight and deliver the content, which is well received. But these things happen.
Absolutely. And that's such a fantastic example, because it's the kind of example that makes people literally, tremble and shake. And it's the one thing that people are scared of. At the beginning of different presentations, you always see these speakers kind of fumble around, and sometimes when the tech is a little bit fussy, they're just kind of standing there and waiting, and that is time wasted. You're so dependent on these tools that you're using that you're not really understanding that what you're there for is to present. What the people are there for is to see you, not to see the PowerPoint. You could have sent that to them in an email. And the fact that after all these years of experience, you're now at a point where you don't need that PowerPoint necessarily. It's in your head. And the fact that you're able to see these positives, that you're able to see, oh, this is actually good because now the eyes are on me. Now I get to build my brand and my reputation in a way more meaningful way, is exactly what I want people to take away. That the PowerPoint, you're not there as a PowerPoint deliverer. You're not there as a PowerPoint reader. You're there to present and share your experiences using whatever tool you've chosen to use. So great example. To wrap it up, I have one last question for you if you have a few minutes. Mm-hmm. When it comes to building your personal brand, a lot of people hesitate putting themselves out there, especially when it comes to creating video content, being in interviews, doing podcasts, doing things that really puts their face, their image, their opinions out there. A lot of people hesitate, and there are a number of reasons for that. But one of the reasons that I've seen is that people are very concerned about what their offline network will think about them, what their family and friends will think about them. And especially in the tech world, there is kind of like this bro culture of, making fun of people that seem to be trying too hard. And I know a lot of people hesitate because they feel that, oh, what are my peers going to say? They're going to think that I just want to be the next influencer. They're going to make fun of me. So did you ever experience that as you've been building your personal brand?
Not too much. I think, in fact, all my colleagues that I worked with have been very encouraging and positive. And actually, I really started this online thing. I've always been on LinkedIn, always doing stuff here and there, but it really kicked off during the pandemic for me because, I was doing a lot of public speaking before the pandemic. I was traveling various cities and doing keynotes, and all sorts of meetings. But after the pandemic, I had lockdowns here, and we had to do everything in a hybrid way or online. So I thought, okay, the way I can reach my audience now is through this online medium, through Zoom. But then it's very important for me to make sure I convey the right image. And so, I invested in and got the right advice to set up the right equipment and the lighting and the sound and set up a studio at home. So that what I was very conscious of is that from an image perspective is that, when I appear on screen, I want to be in control of that. I want it to look sharp. I want it to look good, etc. And I will stand out in the minds of the audience. And a lot of that sort of, laptops at the wrong angle, badly lit with, a cheap pair of headphones. It's like, people got very tired of that very quickly. So I taught myself, A, these techniques. And then B, in terms of when it came to building the brand, was okay, now I need to start creating content, because then people, if I can't go visit people in person, I need to create awareness about what it is that I'm doing. A, what I'm doing for my company, but B, later on, myself as an individual. And the latter part of that has been separating the two things. Is yes, there's always stuff I'm doing as part of my day job, and I have to do that, right? That's important. But also equally important is that I'm also an individual. I also have my own opinions. And if I'm willing to talk about them, I've actually found that people are willing to listen. So yesterday, for example, I did my live podcast on LinkedIn on the Strategy Remix. And I had, I think around 140, 150 people join that live. Around 40% of those were colleagues, and almost all of them messaged me afterwards to say that they really, really like the content, right? And we're talking about podcasting and public speaking. And I have never had any sort of pushback or negativity that, why are you doing this or whatever. Rather, the reverse happens, which is actually, if I go to the office, even if I meet customers or whatever, people see me, people know me, even if I go to dinner parties or whatever, people, oh yeah, no, I saw that, I know you, right? People I haven't met. I've been in a couple of situations where I met customers for the first time. I said, oh no, I saw that video that you did, that was really good, and blah, blah, blah. And then they will spend time, it's happened to me several times now, people I haven't met before will end up explaining back to me or to someone else I'm standing with, oh no, I saw Sammar at this event online, or he did this or that. And, he's really good. He knows his stuff. And that's why he's really good at this. So, so far, it's always been a virtuous circle. Then it spins off, as you get more experience, is okay. Apart from just creating content, is understanding how the medium works and understanding the LinkedIn algorithm and creating different types of content, podcasts versus videos versus articles versus posts and all of that sort of stuff, right? And so if you can master that, I think it's an essential skill, to be honest, because you need to position your own brand, your company's brand, and be visible. And the statement often used when people ask me about that is, what comes up if you Google yourself? You put your name into Google, what comes up? Do you want to be in control of that? The very first page, if you Google my name, what will you see, right? You will see my content, actually. You'll see my LinkedIn posts and so on. You'll see my YouTube videos. I have created that. I have curated that specifically for that purpose. So if anyone Googles my credibility, they will see that, yes, this is content I've created, not necessarily what other people are creating about you or what has tangentially kind of entered the metaverse, if you like, or leaked out because your name is on some document or on some website. So to be in control of your own image is an important benefit, I think, of this content creation. And the final thing to say is that I shared on this podcast yesterday, I think I was looking into this, that of people who want to write a book, for example, some survey said about 20% of the population, on average, I think it was a US survey, would like to write a book, okay? But actually only 0.002% of the population actually write a book, right? What that means, the implication of that, as I shared on my podcast yesterday, was that what you see on the New York Times bestseller list or whatever may not necessarily actually be the very best ideas or the very best stories that anyone has thought of. It's just that the 0.02% actually got around to writing it down and publishing it. But that doesn't mean for all time it's the greatest literature. There might have been many other great authors or potential authors or people many times better than Shakespeare or whatever. They just never wrote it down. So if you don't do it, somebody else will, and they will take the plaudits, and your ideas, your perspectives, your experience may be much richer. And the world, in some ways, may miss the opportunity to have heard your voice.
Those are such excellent reasons. You're one of those perfect ambassadors, I think, for creating your personal brand, because the things you touched upon are just spot on. Being able to be in control of what people see, because you're right, people will see something. They are going to see something when they Google your name, whether you're going for your next interview, whether you're asking for investment for your startup, whether you want to land a client. They're going to Google you, and they're going to see and read whatever is out there. And the moment you start consciously building your personal brand and putting yourself out there, you are more in control. And why would you not want to do that? So it's a no-brainer when you think about that. And I love the second point that you raised, that all of us have so many experiences that we can share. Why would you not want to do that? Why would you not want to leave a legacy where people remember the ideas, the experiences, the things that you shared with them? Why would you want to take them with you to your grave? It sounds like such a waste. So
yes,
it really is a win-win. I definitely agree with you there that building my personal brand has been one of the most rewarding experiences and journeys I have been on in decades of my professional and personal life. And it really is something that keeps on giving, because once you put content out there, it also becomes evergreen. People can look it up days, weeks, months, years later and say, oh yeah, Sammar, you were in that podcast. You were in that interview. I saw this video of you. And
yes,
what a great way to have your reputation precede you. So
no, exactly right. It's there. And again, I'm sometimes surprised people will meet me and say, oh no, I saw that. I saw it last week. And I did that a year ago or 2 years ago. And people are still consuming it, still seeing it. And just they're very active creating content. And for example, I focus a lot on LinkedIn, is that just the act of doing that. Remember, people are scrolling through feeds and so on. They will just see, for example, they will just see that you've created something. They will see that you are present, even if they don't necessarily interact with that content, if they don't leave a like or leave a comment or even watch, your 30-second, 1 minute, 5-minute video, they'll just be aware that you're present. Yeah. And so one important strategy is, yes, you are present, you're seen regularly, and people know that, right? And they will automatically have an image of you to say, yes, you're a creator, you're talking about this topic, you have a sense of authority. Yeah. And they'll ask you other questions. I was in the office yesterday and someone said, oh, I haven't seen you for a while, but I saw this on LinkedIn. How did you do that? How did you make this? How did you do that? What software did you use? And, all this sort of stuff. People are thinking, even if not necessarily absorbing what it is that particular topic you're talking about, it may not be of necessarily direct interest to them, but they will see that you're doing something.
Yeah. And being visible now in an age where people see and consume so much data all the time, being visible and being top of mind is priceless. So definitely those are great thoughts to leave our audience with. Thank you so much, Sammar, for taking the time, for sharing your experiences, your stories. It has been a fascinating conversation, and I really want to talk to you again at some point. I feel like we could talk for a very long time on personal branding, but also speaking as a leader and all the leadership lessons that you've learned in your wonderful 25 years of your professional life and journey. So thank you again so much for taking the time and for speaking to me.
Most welcome. And thank you for inviting me.